The lights went dark, casting an eerie shadow over the festive street. Karen's hands trembled as she stared at the severed cables, realizing too late a hornet's nest she had stirred. Little did she know, this was no ordinary holiday display. It was a tribute to those who had fought for our freedom. And someone was about to make her pay. I can't believe she did this. Alicia fumed, pacing the living room as her husband John watched, equally enraged. That witch has been nothing but trouble since we moved in. John clenched his fist, the veins in his neck bulging. I should have known better than to trust that woman. After all we've done for this community. Earlier that day, the festive lights lining their front yard had shone brightly, a testament to the sacrifices of local veterans. But now, darkness blanketed the street, a sickening reminder of Karen's calloused act. What are we going to do? Alicia asked, her voice trembling. This display means everything to the VFW. They're counting on us. John's jaw tightened. We're going to make that woman pay. No one disrespects our troops and gets away with it. He stormed out of the house, Alicia close behind. The crisp winter air did little to cool their tempers as they approached Karen's door, their footsteps heavy with purpose. Karen peered through the curtains, a smug grin spreading across her face. Perfect timing, she muttered, opening the door with feigned innocence. I was just admiring your lovely lights. Or should I say, lack thereof. You know damn well what you did, Karen. John spat, his eyes narrowing. How dare you sabotage our Veterans Day display? Karen feigned surprise, her hand fluttering to her chest. I have no idea what you're talking about. I was simply trimming my hedges when I accidentally cut the wires. Surely that was an honest mistake. Alicia's nostrils flared. Don't play dumb with us. We know you've been trying to get us to take down those lights for weeks. This was no accident. Well, if it was such an important display, you should have taken better care of it. Karen retorted, her saccharine tone dripping with disdain. Maybe next year, you'll learn to be more responsible. John's fist clenched at his side, his knuckles turning white. You're going to pay for this, Karen. Every penny it costs to fix those lights, you're going to reimburse. And if you so much as touch another one of our decorations, I'll make sure you regret it. Karen's eyes narrowed, a challenge sparking in their depths. We'll see about that, she hissed, slamming the door in their faces. Alicia grabbed John's arm, her nails digging into his skin. What are we going to do? The VFW is counting on us, and now we've got to replace all those lights. John's jaw tightened, a plan already forming in his mind. Don't worry, honey. I've got an idea. Karen's about to learn a lesson she'll never forget. Would you like me to continue with part? John's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing with possibilities. I'm not going to let that woman get away with this, he muttered, his eyes narrowed with determination. Alicia glanced nervously at her husband, sensing the fury bubbling beneath the surface. What are you thinking, John? We can't stoop to her level. Don't worry, honey, John replied, his voice low and steady. I've got a plan. One that'll teach Karen a lesson she'll never forget. As they pulled into the driveway, John's gaze fell on the darkened display, a pang of disappointment twisting in his chest. This wasn't just any holiday lights display. It was a tribute to the brave men and women who had served their country, a symbol of the sacrifices they had made. And Karen had the audacity to destroy it. All right, here's what we're going to do, John said, turning to Alicia with a determined gleam in his eye. First, we need to assess the damage and figure out how much it's going to cost to fix those lights. Then, we're going to confront Karen again, but this time, we're going to play her at her own game. Alicia's brow furrowed, but she listened intently as John laid out his plan. As the details unfolded, her eyes widened, and a slight smile tugged at the corners of her lips. John, you're brilliant, she breathed, a newfound resolve hardening her features. Let's do it. The next day, John and Alicia stood once more on Karen's doorstep, their expressions a mixture of anger and determination. "What do you two want now?" Karen snapped, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. "We've come to discuss the cost of repairing the lights you so carelessly destroyed," John replied, his voice calm and measured. Karen's lips curled into a smug grin. "I told you it was an accident. I'm not paying for anything." "Oh, well, you are, Karen," Alicia interjected, her tone deceptively sweet. "You see, we've already gotten quotes from several local electricians, and the total cost to fix the damage is over $500. Karen's eyes widened, and for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "That's outrageous. I'm not paying that much for some silly lights." "Well, then, I guess we'll just have to take this to the authorities," John said, his voice laced with a hint of triumph. "You know, the police, the city council, even the VFW. I'm sure they'd be very interested to hear about how you deliberately sabotaged our Veterans Day display." Karen's face paled, and she quickly glanced around, as if afraid someone might be watching. "You can't do that," she hissed, her composure slipping. "Oh, but we can," Alicia replied, her eyes narrowing. "And if you don't pay up, that's exactly what we'll do. After all, the whole neighborhood knows how much those lights mean to us and the veterans we're supporting." Karen's lips tightened into a thin line, and for a moment, the two women engaged in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Karen let out a frustrated sigh and reached into her purse, pulling out a wad of bills. "Here," she growled, thrusting the money into John's hand. "Take it and get out of my sight." John grinned, his fingers closing around the cash. "Thank you, Karen. I'm sure the veterans will appreciate your generous contribution." As they turned to leave, Alicia couldn't resist one last jab. "Oh, and Karen, next time you decide to mess with our holiday display, you might want to remember that it's sponsored by the VFW. They don't take kindly to anyone who disrespects our troops." The door slammed behind them, and John and Alicia exchanged a triumphant look. "That'll teach her," John murmured, pocketing the money. But as they walked back to their car, a nagging feeling of unease began to creep into the back of Alicia's mind. Something told her that this was far from over, and that Karen was not the type of person to simply. As John and Alicia stepped through the front door, a sense of relief washed over them. They had stood up to Karen and won, at least for now. The $500 they had extracted from her would cover the cost of repairing the damaged holiday lights display, and they could move forward with their plans to honor the local veterans. "I can't believe we actually got that money out of her," Alicia said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I half expected her to slam the door in our faces again." John chuckled, his expression hardening with a hint of triumph. "That's the thing about bullies like Karen. They act all tough, but when you stand up to them, they crumble. She knew we had her dead to rights, and she didn't want to risk the public humiliation." Alicia nodded, her eyes sparkling with a newfound confidence. "Well, I'm glad we showed her who's boss. Now let's get those lights back up and ready for the big unveiling tomorrow night." As they set to work, a sense of determination filled the air. The display had always been a labor of love, but now it felt more important than ever. It was a symbol of their community's resilience, a testament to the sacrifices of those who had served. "You know, I'm actually kind of excited to see Karen's face when she sees the lights back on," Alicia mused, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. John chuckled, giving her a playful nudge. "I'm sure it'll be priceless. But let's not dwell on her too much. This display is about honoring our veterans, not getting even with our nosy neighbor." Alicia's expression softened, and she reached out to squeeze John's hand. "You're right. This is about so much more than just a petty feud. It's about showing our community that we're proud of our veterans and that we won't let anyone disrespect their sacrifices." As the last of the lights flickered to life, a hush fell over the street. Neighbors began to trickle out of their homes, drawn by the familiar glow. Alicia and John stood back, admiring their handiwork, their hearts swelling with pride. It's perfect, Alicia murmured, leaning her head against John's shoulder. Yeah, John agreed, his voice thick with emotion. Just wait until tomorrow night. This is going to be the best Veterans Day celebration the neighborhood has ever seen. Little did they know, however, that a storm was brewing on the horizon. Karen, her pride wounded and her thirst for revenge unquenched, was already plotting her next move. And this time, she was determined to strike where it would. As the sun began to set, the neighborhood came alive with the glow of the meticulously restored holiday lights display. Families gathered, their faces aglow with wonder and appreciation, as they marveled at the stunning tribute to the local veterans. John and Alicia stood back, beaming with pride, their hands clasped together. This was the moment they had been working towards, the culmination of weeks of hard work and dedication. It's even more beautiful than I remembered, Alicia whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. John nodded, his expression softening. I know. It's a reminder of why we do this every year, to honor those who have given so much for our freedom. The crowd began to swell, and soon the air was filled with the sound of laughter and excited chatter. Neighbors greeted one another, sharing stories and expressing their gratitude for the display. But as John and Alicia made their way through the throng, a familiar figure caught their eye. Karen, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, stood on the edge of the crowd, her gaze fixed on the dazzling lights. Alicia's grip on John's hand tightened. Look, there's Karen. She doesn't look happy. John followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. Let her stew. She knows she lost this round, and there's nothing she can do about it. As if on cue, Karen turned towards them, her eyes narrowing to slits. She stalked over, her high heels clicking on the pavement. Well, well, look who's the big hero, she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. I must say, I'm impressed. You managed to guilt-trip me into paying for your little display. John stepped forward, his posture defensive. It's not a little display, Karen. It's a tribute to the brave men and women who have served our country, something you clearly have no respect for. Karen's lips curled into a cruel smile. Oh, I respect the troops all right. But I also respect property rights, and those lights are on my side of the street. Alicia's eyes widened, and she gripped John's arm. You can't be serious. You're not going to try and take them down again, are you? Karen's gaze swept over the crowd, and a gleam of satisfaction flickered in her eyes. Oh, I wouldn't dream of it. Not with all these witnesses around. But mark my words, this isn't over. With that, she turned on her heel and stalked away, leaving John and Alicia in a state of uneasy confusion. What do you think she's planning? Alicia whispered, her brow furrowed with concern. John shook his head, his expression grim. I don't know, but whatever it is, it can't be good. We need to be vigilant, Alicia. Something tells me Karen isn't done with us yet. As the evening wore on, the crowd continued to admire the display, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. And somewhere, in the shadows, Karen was already hatching her next move, her thirst for revenge fueling. The next morning dawned, crisp and clear, and John and Alicia eagerly made their way to the front yard to check on the holiday lights display. As they rounded the corner, their hearts sank, and a collective gasp escaped their lips. The once vibrant lights now lay in a tangled mess on the ground, the cables severed and the bulbs shattered. Worse still, a large banner had been hung across the display, its bold letters mocking their efforts. Stuol en veillor. Take day one, des shame. Alicia's hands trembled as she surveyed the devastation. No, this can't be happening, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. John's jaw clenched, and his eyes narrowed with a barely contained fury. That witch, he growled, his fists balling at his sides. I knew she was up to something, but this is unforgivable. They quickly began to assess the damage, their hearts sinking with each broken bulb and severed wire. The display that had once been a source of pride and joy had been reduced to a pile of rubble. A cruel reminder of the lengths Karen was willing to go to get her way. As the neighbors began to emerge from their homes, the news spread like wildfire. Gasps of shock and outrage filled the air, and soon a small crowd had gathered, their faces etched with disbelief and anger. Who would do something like this? One neighbor exclaimed, shaking her head in dismay. This is an outrage. Another cried, his voice trembling with indignation. Those lights were a tribute to our veterans. John and Alicia stood amidst the chaos, their eyes scanning the crowd, searching for any sign of their nemesis. But Karen was nowhere to be seen, her absence adding fuel to the growing fire of suspicion. We need to call the police, Alicia said, her voice quivering. This is vandalism, pure and simple, and we can't let Karen get away with it. John nodded, his expression grim. You're right, and we need to notify the VFW as well. They need to know what's happened to their display. As the sirens wailed in the distance, a hush fell over the crowd, and all eyes turned towards the ruined lights. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, a palpable sense of betrayal and heartbreak settling over the community. For John and Alicia, the anger and devastation was palpable, but they knew that in this moment they couldn't afford to let their emotions consume them. They had to stay strong for the sake of the veterans they were honoring, and for the sake of their neighborhood. As the police arrived and began to investigate the scene, John and Alicia steeled themselves, ready to face whatever came next. They knew that Karen's reign of terror was far from over, and that the battle lines had been drawn. This was war, and they were determined to win. The police swarmed the scene, their blue and red lights casting an eerie glow over the devastated holiday display. John and Alicia stood by, their faces etched with a mixture of fury and determination, as the officers meticulously catalogued the damage. This is a clear case of vandalism, the lead detective announced, his brow furrowed with concern. And given the nature of the display, we're treating it as a potential hate crime as well. The crowd murmured in agreement, their anger palpable. Alicia gripped John's hand, her knuckles turning white. We have to find out who did this, she whispered, her voice trembling. It has to be Karen. John's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. I'm sure of it. That woman has been nothing but trouble since we moved in, and this is the kind of stunt she'd pull. The detective approached them, his expression grave. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, we're going to need to ask you a few questions. Can you think of anyone who might have a grudge against you or the display? John's gaze flickered towards Karen's house, the curtains drawn tight. There is one person, he said, his voice laced with accusation. Our neighbor, Karen. She's been trying to get us to take down the lights for weeks, and she's never made any secret of her disdain for the VFW. The detective nodded, jotting down a note. I see. We'll be sure to pay Ms. Karen a visit. In the meantime, I need you both to give me a detailed account of what happened. As John and Alicia recounted the events leading up to the vandalism, the detective listened intently, his expression growing graver with each passing moment. When they finished, he let out a heavy sigh. This is a serious offense, folks, he said, his voice stern. Damaging a memorial display like this, especially one that honors our veterans, is a felony. We're going to do everything in our power to find the culprit and bring them to justice. A cheer went up from the crowd, and Alicia felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you, officer. We'll do whatever we can to help. The detective nodded, his gaze sweeping over the gathered neighbors. I need all of you to keep your eyes and ears open. If anyone saw or heard anything suspicious, I need you to come forward immediately. This display is a point of pride for our community, and we won't let some vandal tear it down. As the police began to interview the neighbors, John and Alicia turned their attention to the task of assessing the damage. The once vibrant display lay in ruins, the evidence of Karen's handiwork painfully obvious. We've got to fix this, Alicia murmured, her voice laced with determination. We can't let her win. Not after everything we've done. John nodded, his expression hardening. Don't worry, honey. We're not going down without a fight. Karen's about to learn a lesson she'll never forget. With renewed resolve, they set to work, determined to restore the display to its former glory, and to make sure that Karen paid for her stuff. As the police investigation intensified, the community rallied around John and Alicia, determined to see justice served. Neighbors volunteered their time and resources to help repair the damaged display, their faces etched with a mixture of anger and resolve. But even as the lights slowly began to flicker back to life, a sense of unease continued to linger. Karen, the notorious neighborhood nuisance, had evaded the police and remained holed up in her home, leaving the community to wonder what her next move might be. Alicia paced the living room, her brow furrowed with worry. I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen's got to be planning something else. John nodded, his expression grim. I know, and we need to be ready for it. This display means everything to the VFO, and we can't let her destroy it again. As they mulled over their options, a knock at the door interrupted their thoughts. Exchanging a puzzled glance, John moved to answer it, only to find a weathered-looking man in a VFO uniform standing on their doorstep. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, the man asked, his voice gruff but kind. I'm Jack, the commander of the local VFO post. We heard about what happened to your display, and we wanted to come and offer our support. Alicia's eyes widened, and she ushered the man inside. Please come in. We're so grateful for your help. Jack nodded, his gaze sweeping over the room. This display is a point of pride for our post, and we take the disrespect shown to it very personally. We want to do whatever we can to help you get it back up and running. John shook the man's hand, a hint of relief in his expression. That's very kind of you, Jack. We've been working around the clock to repair the damage, but it's been a real challenge. Well, you're not alone in this fight, Jack said, his eyes narrowing with determination. We've got a team of volunteers ready to lend a hand, and we're not going to let some petty vandal tear down what we've built. Alicia's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you, Jack. We really appreciate it. But there's something else we need your help with. Jack leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Anything. Just name it. We think our neighbor, Karen, is behind this, Alicia explained, her voice laced with frustration. She's been trying to get us to take down the display for weeks, and we're convinced she's the one who did this. Jack's expression darkened, and he let out a low growl. That woman has no idea who she's messing with. The VFW takes care of its own, and we won't stand for anyone disrespecting our troops or our community. He turned to John, his gaze unwavering. Tell me what you need, and we'll make sure that Karen gets the message loud and clear. Nobody messes with the VFO and gets away with it. John and Alicia exchanged a determined look, their hearts swelling with a newfound sense of hope. With the VFW on their side, they knew that Karen wouldn't stand a chance. Let's show her what it means to mess with the veterans, John said, his voice steady and resolute. And as the sun began to set, the holiday lights display flickered back to life, a testament to the unwavering spirit of the community and the unbreakable bond between the VFO. And, as the evening wore on, the once damaged holiday display shone brighter than ever, its vibrant lights a symbol of the community's resilience and determination. Neighbors gathered, their faces alight with pride and gratitude, as they admired the restored tribute to the local veterans. But amidst the joyous celebrations, a lone figure lurked in the shadows, her eyes narrowed with seething resentment. Karen, her face twisted in a scowl, watched from the confines of her home, fuming at the sight of the display she had so desperately tried to destroy. This isn't over, she muttered under her breath, her fingers drumming against the windowsill. Those fools think they've won, but I'm just getting started. Unbeknownst to Karen, her every move was being closely monitored by the watchful eyes of the VFW. Jack, the gruff but kind-hearted commander, had personally mobilized a team of volunteers to keep a vigilant watch over the display, determined to prevent any further acts of vandalism. As the night wore on, Karen's restlessness only grew. She paced her living room, her mind racing with schemes and plots, until finally she could no longer contain her fury. Grabbing a pair of bolt cutters, she stormed out of her house, her steps heavy with purpose. But just as she reached the edge of the display, a figure stepped out of the shadows, barring her path. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, ma'am," Jack said, his voice calm, but laced with a steely resolve. Karen froze, her eyes widening in surprise. "What is the meaning of this?" she sputtered, her hands trembling. "The meaning is simple," Jack replied, his gaze unwavering. "This display is a tribute to our veterans, and we won't let anyone, especially someone like you, desecrate it." Karen's lips curled into a sneer. "You can't stop me. This is my property, and I'll do whatever I want with it." Jack shook his head, a hint of pity in his expression. "I'm afraid that's not the case, ma'am. You see, the VFW has a long history of protecting its own, and we take that responsibility very seriously." He gestured to the group of veterans who had emerged from the darkness, their faces grim and their posture resolute. "These men and women have served our country with honor and distinction, and they're not about to let some petty vandal destroy the legacy they fought to preserve." Karen's face paled, and she took a step back, the bolt cutters slipping from her grip. "You can't do this," she stammered, her voice laced with desperation. "Oh, but we can," Jack replied, his lips curving into a slight smile. "You see, we've been keeping a close eye on you, Karen. We know all about your little stunt, and we've got the evidence to prove it." He pulled out a smartphone, its screen glowing with a series of surveillance footage. "We've got you on camera, Karen, cutting those lights, vandalizing the display, and trying to intimidate the Johnsons. It's all here, clear as day." Karen's eyes widened in horror, and she began to back away, her hands raised in a futile gesture of surrender. "No, this can't be happening," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It is happening, Karen," Jack said, his voice grave. "And the consequences are going to be severe. You see, we've already notified the authorities, and they'll be here shortly to take you into custody." As if on cue, the sound of sirens pierced the night, and Karen's face crumpled in defeat. She sank to her knees, her shoulders shaking with sobs, as the police officers approached and placed her in handcuffs. John and Alicia, who had been watching the scene unfold from the sidelines, exchanged a triumphant look. "Justice has been served," Alicia murmured, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and satisfaction. John nodded, his expression softening. "And the VFW has proven that they'll always have our backs. This community is truly blessed to have them." As the lights continued to shine brightly, illuminating the night, the neighborhood came together to celebrate the victory, their hearts filled with a renewed sense of unity and pride. And for John and Alicia, the knowledge that they had stood up to Karen's bullying and emerged victorious was the greatest gift of all.